started. So welcome everyone. I'm Laura Manley. I am the workshop manager. I'll do whatever needs doing here at Episcopal Parish Network. And we're so thankful you all are here with us today to explore this topic of spiritual resilience, especially through the eyes of clergy spouses. It's such a perfect topic, and it's perfectly timed with everything going on in the world right now. As I said, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're from. We love to see where everybody's from. Before we get started on the topic at hand, I just wanted to thank all of the member parishes and organizations that are here today and in the background supporting the work that we do here, allowing us to offer all of these workshops and resources to members of the Episcopal Church and beyond. We are so thankful. We couldn't do all that without the support you give us. So thank you so much. If you are not a member and would like to be a member, you can find that on our website. I'll post that information in the chat. And we have some wonderful benefits. You have free access to our executive director. We have great cohorts, and our conference, of course, which is coming up in February in Kansas City this year. And we're going to be joined by our new presiding Bishop Sean. He likes to be called Presiding Bishop Sean. We are not to call him Roe because puns get involved. So we're calling him Bishop Sean, and we're so thankful that he is going to be joining us in Kansas City at the end of February. So I hope we'll see you all there. It's going to be a wonderful time. A little cold, but wonderful. So a couple housekeeping notes before I turn it over. So we're recording this workshop. If you didn't hear that lovely voice pop in and say that they're recording, this recording and any accompanying materials from the panelists will be available in our workshop library, again, on our website. Feel free to share this recording far and wide. We love to get this information out to whoever you feel would need it. That is the goal of Episcopal Parish Network, to share resources and information. The Q&A feature is disabled. We prefer that you put your questions in the chat. That's because we will be printing the chat transcript. It will be accompanying the recording. So you'll be able to see any questions that get asked, along with hearing the answers, see any links the panelists share. So please keep all that information in the chat. We'd appreciate that. And I think that's all the housekeeping. So I would love to turn this over to Laura Jackson from the Partners Path. Welcome, Laura, and thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Laura, and thanks everybody for being here. So the Partners Path, I should say, is a nonprofit that is about 4 years old that comes alongside the Episcopal Church to support, as does EPN, to support spouses and partners of Episcopal clergy. That is a population with a complex role that plays out in a lot of varied ways, and yet we find there are some really familiar common challenges when people get together to talk about it, or common experiences, both challenges and gifts. Today, I want to talk about some of the gifts, which in some ways are responses to the challenges. This work comes out of a Doctor of Ministry thesis in progress. I've done the research and I'm in the writing part. But these are also patterns that I've been seeing for a couple of decades in this work. And I am going to figure out how to share my screen and make the slideshow do its thing. There we go. So the challenges that we see, what I see is that clergy spouses, in order to navigate this role, have to learn things that other people can also benefit from learning, but it really is a make or break factor in contentment and flourishing in the clergy spouse life. And so over years of watching these patterns, we see some things that we can pass along. Um, what is weird, everybody knows that being clergy has complicated elements. Being the clergy spouse might seem like not a big deal, but the role, it's not a job, the role comes with a lot of expectations. Different people may have different expectations of what their pastor's partner is going to be like, how they're going to show up in community, how they're going to seem as a person. And often, in not disappointing someone, you do disappoint someone else. It's an interesting environment of sort of constant, unpredictable feedback. Um, there's an insider outsider role where you're very much embedded in a community, but you're not really, can't really function as a parishioner. You're not really invited to be a leader, but you're present often. It's a very particular thing. And there's keeping counsel is what I put in the PowerPoint here, but the real name of this issue is the Fight Club rule. Remember this movie? The first rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. The first rule that clergy spouses often learn is there are so many places where speaking about what you see or what you know or what you feel or what you experience could rock the boat and hurt someone or cause trouble for someone. And so there's not a lot of places to process the things that you're experiencing, which is a big difference from, I think, other people's lives that may have things to process. I'm going to move on. We've seen the pattern that we've seen about what is really tends towards success. The people who really stay in the game, they stay married, their partner stays in ministry, and they're basically well and happy. Are the people who master these three sort of jobs and they go in order, developing the capacity to set safe boundaries, to understand really what your own needs are and what your family's needs are, and to make the space to make sure that those things happen. Then after that, to reconnect to things that intentionally to things that give you joy, even if they're really tiny, and to sort of seek those out. And finally, once that's done, to find ways proactively to connect and collaborate with the people around you. I used to call this one vocation. And for lay people who are married to clergy, that's kind of a weighted word in a lot of ways. But I do think it's a human need to find our place in the world and how we can give back. And that plays in some interesting ways with the question of boundaries and expectations. But having done this other work, I see people come back around and say, yeah, but I want to be involved in the ways that I choose. How can I give something to the community? So I've brought three clergy spouses today to talk with us about their experiences of these things. And Charles, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself first and maybe tell us a story about boundary negotiation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Zaucha. We live out in Elgin, Illinois. And you can see there's a picture of my family. Me and my husband, we have become foster parents as well as now subsequent adoption parents, right? And so being a parent comes with so much just in general, but then being a parent and also being a clergy spouse adds its own sort of extra level to what that means. When we became foster parents, it was approximately like 2 days before we were having our first open house. And so we quickly had to then sort of understand what our internal family expectations are, what some of the church expectations might be. And then so what is our heart line boundary? What has a little bit more flexibility to it? And these were hard conversations, right? Because it was our first time being foster parents, first time having kids in our home, and just trying to figure out, okay, will we allow the church to babysit our children? Will we not allow the church to babysit our children? How many donations are we going to just like accept, right? Or we become the drop off for every donation of everything that somebody wants to relinquish? So me and my husband, we sat down and we had, we worked it out. We listened to what other clergy families have done and what their experiences were. And that's having those conversations sort of help set the stage for what our experience would be as foster parents, as well as then adoptive parents, right? What questions are we going to allow people to ask us? What are inappropriate questions? What are appropriate questions? What of our kids' backgrounds do we want to share or not share? As well as who is allowed to give our kids, extra cookies at coffee hour. As you can see, there's 5 kids, and I cannot have all 5 kids get a cookie from every grandparent at church. It becomes quickly not manageable, and I'm the one who takes them home after church, right? So, and with that, it always hasn't been perfect, but one thing is consistent is me and my spouse talking about, what are the boundaries, especially as their kids grow, what we allow them to do. Our oldest daughter has recently started participating as an acolyte, right? And I know that there's always the expectation that the preacher's kids will serve, and it was 100% her choice. And there's times where she wants to do it, and there's times where she is like, I'm gonna sit down today. I'm like, you know what, and that's perfectly acceptable, right? Allowing our kids to have what they want their role in the church to be is also very important for us. And making sure that we've had that conversation with members of our congregation to let them know, like, there's no pressure on our kids to do any of this. And so if they want to join, that is absolutely their choice. And having these boundaries has really helped us in a very strong way. It's allowed me to be able to have my relationship with the church at the level that I want to have it. It allows my husband to sort of know and understand where we lie as a family with the church. And it allows us to just also be at church, right? I'm not at church to move a pew or to hang up something or to change a light bulb or any some of these other little last minute things. I'm at church to also just be at church. That is also my worship time. And so one of the minor funny situations that has happened was, I'm walking into church with all 5 kids. And I noticed that there was just sort of a small mulch fire outside of our building. And there's all this smoke and everyone sort of sees it and was just like, oh, you can smell it. And it was just sort of, they thought it was the remnants of the big church barbecue that we had the night before, just the smell of the smoke. And so I just, I see it and I go in and I'm like, Warden, you're an adult. There's a fire outside. Y'all handle this. I'm taking my kids to go sit, right? Like, there was no instinct for me to be like, okay, let me go fix this, whatever. Like, we have our boundaries, and my boundary is I am now taking my kids to go to church. And there's plenty of other folks that can go handle this situation at this time, right? So, and the last thing I'll say is setting boundaries is a continuous conversation. Things change, environments change. I know the boundaries we had when we first joined our parish 7 years ago are slightly different than the boundaries we have today, right? Because I'm in a much more comfortable place. I now know a lot more of these families, but it's still a continuous conversation as things throughout the world happen and change. Like, what are today's boundaries? What are this year's boundaries going to be? And so I definitely encourage folks to. It's not a static conversation. It's a continual conversation that they should be having.
Thank you so much. One of the I've heard you talk about this, of course, but one of the things that really struck me today was that some of your examples of the places that you've had to name and negotiate boundaries are really sweet things. People want to give your kids cookies. People want to bring you clothes, right? Like, it's it's not, oh, we have to set a boundary because people are attacking us. Like your experience is the people in the parish want to show love to your family, and they're not inside your family and they don't know what's going to work for you.
Right. And so one of the sort of the things that I've always sort of remembered is that I love where we're at St. Anne's. I love our church. I love our community. I love the people that are there. Um, but a lot of them I see for an hour on a Sunday where we're really just sitting in the room, right? And so I think of it as I also see that person at Target every time I shop at Target, right? So do I allow the Target person to give my child a cookie? Right? There may be times where that's perfectly acceptable, but there's also times where it's not, right? Where it's like, okay, I am the parent. I'm not relinquishing any of my parental rights because these are my kids. And so it comes with both things where yes, there's times where people absolutely are giving us many blessings. Like I'll never turn down a meal if they want to cook a full meal for the family. Well, there we go. But some of the other things where it's like, yeah, it's we recently had Halloween and everyone wants to give our kids candy, and I can't have that.
Oh no, too much Halloween candy. So is there any, do you ever feel like if I say no, thank you to this thing, there's gonna be some, like maybe that will damage a relationship or hurt something? How do you think about that?
There, I think in the beginning I was a lot more concerned about that, about how
Hmm.
would folks feel, right? Because folks are trying to just be generous,
Hmm.
but people are allowed to always be generous, but that doesn't mean you have to accept every gift.
I feel like there's something here about letting people know how to love you.
Yes, and letting them know what that sort of what that expectation is, right? And so if if I don't feel that I have to accept everything. I
Hmm.
don't feel that I have to accept everything. Um, and then also letting folks know, okay, so if you do want to do something for our family, that is greatly appreciated. These are the ways that
Hmm.
that you can do that for us, right? Giving folks that
Hmm.
avenue for if they wanted to do something, this is how they could do it. I think also helps them because then they start to understand, okay, I'm not going to bring them, size 4T pants every Sunday. It's they
So
need
it's not,
this instead.
it's not rejection, it's redirection.
Yes. Yeah.
And then sometimes there are times, right, where you're just like, I won't be doing that. I'm not going to teach Sunday school, or I'm not going to
Yeah.
stop what I'm doing and put out the fire with 5 kids around me. Um,
Yeah.
and so here's how I'm going to show up with you, but I'm with you, right? And I think
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody wonders if you care about them, you know,
Correct.
but
Right. There's always the there's even like the right way to receive gifts, right? Where it's like, where you can still be gracious, like, thank you for that opportunity, but I'm okay.
thank you. That's really helpful. So I think one of the pieces too that I really want to bring out of this is that I was in a conversation recently where I heard there was some talk about setting boundaries, and I heard some people say, "Oh, haha, I can't do that. Oh, haha, like that would work. I can't. Oh, I can't set a boundary because the person won't listen to me." And I think reminded me that if we believe boundary setting is about controlling other people's behavior, then boundary setting is going to feel impossible because in fact we don't control other people's behavior. Right. Boundary setting that's effective is about deciding what we're going to do. Right. You can't say you're not going to say no one, even the new person who doesn't know, will never offer my kid Halloween candy. Right. But you can say when people deliver us Halloween candy, we pass it on to the wherever
Yeah.
it is I was in my dentist office last week and they had a whole corner of the floor full of Halloween candy that they're taking, I don't know, to be recycled, whatever they do with it, give to poor children who don't have any candy. I don't know. But like you can be like, when that happens, we don't, we do this. Here's how we respond to that. So there's like that puts back the agency of like, no, I can't decide what you're gonna do, but I can be clear about what I'm gonna do or not do.
Yeah.
So thank you. All of this boundary setting and limit setting, I mean, it's real in that it's not, they're not made up. It's like knowing our limits. Like if my kids eat 5 cookies each during church, they're gonna tear the house apart after church. So to have a functional house, we don't do that. But I think clearing that protected space then can start to feel a little bit empty or rigid or blah. Like early on, you're just like, okay, everything stay out. And then you're like, but what's in? And so the next thing that I see people really, I think we covered these questions on the slide. Does this seem like these are some of I just threw this up. These are some of the things that I think the fire story made me think of what are my first obligations here? Like your obligation was to your kids, not to be the building and grounds committee on a crisis basis. And you knew other people had that as their first obligation and they would do it. So, but then the next one that I see people need to tackle after that is reconnecting to sources of joy. And that is not a cookie cutter answer. That's what is joy for you. So we've set our boundaries to ensure survival. And then if we want to thrive, we need to find even microdoses of what is joyful for us. And I'm going to let Eli speak to an experience of that.
Bonsoir à tous. Hello, friends. I'm Eli Harlan, and I'm in Paris, and we've been here about 15 months. Thanks for having me tonight. So when I was little, I loved to color. Like I would find myself on the bedroom floor, laid out with all my colors, and I'm doing all the things. And so, when this adult coloring book thing came out, it kind of re-inspired me. Along the way, I learned some different art techniques. But one of the things that happened in 2020 when the world shut down is I really recaptured my love and passion for art. I had trained in a simple pattern drawing sort of way, and it's called Zentangle. And I'm now a Zentangle certified instructor. And as I began to develop this practice, and really it got me through COVID, I tangled every day. Some portion of the day, I would sit down, and the image you're seeing right now is called a tile. It's about this size. You can see that it's about 3 by 3. And literally all you need is a piece of paper and a pen. And so you can go anywhere, do this. You can sit down for 5 minutes and create something. What I found, which was kind of astonishing to me, was when things began to open up, I would have these little God incidents. And I would need to go to the store and something would delay me at home, and I'd be frustrated or whatever. And I would go to the store and I would encounter someone, usually from the parish, somebody who needed something. I remember a woman who had lost her husband, and I just had such a heart for this woman. It was even hard to express, but I encountered her at the store and I was able to just share a moment with her. And it was sort of in that way that I realized all that art that I was creating in that time that I was sort of spending in the Zen space or whatever was an act of prayer for me. I'm a raging extrovert and I have a really hard time being super quiet. So for me, being active and quiet is a way for me to encounter the holy. And as I began to develop my teaching structure, this thought from the heavens came one day that, I love Lectio Divina, I love Zentangle, and how can we put those together? And I was able to teach some classes and do some retreats. And for me, it has gotten me through a lot, just a lot of changes and all this kind of stuff. And what I would love for you to think about, if this kind of sits with you, is, do you remember something in your childhood that you loved? Maybe it was just, I don't know, maybe it was going to get ice cream. Maybe it was playing soccer. Maybe it was, sewing, or just anything, playing with your brothers, making up stories, writing. That's maybe something to think about that could tickle your brain to be like, what might be my joy that I could express a little bit, or something that just sort of, oh, I always wanted to try blah, blah, blah. Maybe find some space in your life that can happen. So these two pieces that you're seeing on the screen right now, I just created, and it was from reading Isaiah 42, 1-9. And the word that I basically did Lectio Divina with myself, my word was covenant. And so I just designed these, and just to show you kind of what can be. Teaching Zentangle in the beginning is kind of hard because you have to internalize the patterns. And once you internalize the patterns, and you can create things like this. And do you have that next one? Is it the 7? One of the other things that I have just sort of fallen into is I'm a heart hunter. So I did, in the art world, there's this thing called the 100-Day Project. And so you do something for 100 days. So I started looking for hearts in nature, in, wherever, in food, in all these kinds of places. And it was interesting how people responded to me with sending me hearts, and this communication through social media just kind of comes. And I have people who, maybe I've known for 20 years who just occasionally send me a heart. They're like, I saw a heart today and I thought of you. So that's another space for joy for me. Yeah.
Eli, thanks. I'm really struck by the playfulness, the permission to play.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
That expands out of that tiny bit of reclaiming that childish practice.
Yeah.
That has turned into also this whole grown-up thing.
Right. And another thing that really inspired my just wanting to protect my art time was choosing a word for the year. And my word several years ago was scribble. And I wanted to embody that, exactly that you're saying, that idea that play is so important. And it doesn't matter what age we are or what we're doing in life, that's super important. So yeah,
and
that's how
permission,
Yeah.
I think, because I feel like we can have this voice in our head that says, well, that's silly. You don't have time for that. You don't need that.
Yeah.
Like, and to your story about when you show the thing you started with, and it's this tiny tile that takes 5 minutes and 1 pen, it doesn't take up a lot of space. It's not very demanding. It's a little pocket, like a micro practice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that grew for you into something that connected you with other people and helped you see them better.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's the theme, right? As you talk about it, it has brought you into leading retreats, helping other people to do this play practice.
Yeah, for sure.
And as you say that
you know, yeah,
people are now playing this heart game with you from all
yeah,
over the world.
yeah, it's super fun. So do it.
So it's which
Find your
leads
thing.
yeah, well it leads wonderfully into the next bit, which is about connection. So I think once,
Yeah.
you know, the beginning before you set boundaries can feel kind of overwhelmed by connection and like too much connection, you don't get to pick what kind, and that's never a good feeling. But after the boundaries, and then after finding that spark of joy and cultivating it, there's a third need that I see in people, and it's how do I connect back to people out of this place of playfulness, wholeness, authenticity, whatever that I've discovered in this boundaried space. Um, and I think this is the one that I used to call vocation, and now I'm calling it connection, collaboration.
Mhm.
But I think it's so much about like, what are your gifts? What gives you joy? And then how does that, it's it's different for each person, but then also it turns out it speaks to other people. Um, and that brings us, I think, to Ellen's story.
Mhm.
So I'm Ellen Prawl. I'm in Freeport, Illinois, which is super close to Wisconsin. It's like 20 minutes from the Wisconsin border. And we've been here for about 6 years. And I would say, so going back to what we've already talked about, that my joy is singing. I'm a music teacher. Oh, I apologize. It's the end of the school day. My joy is singing, and I always found joy in church, being in choirs and creating music. And then now I'm a clergy spouse, and now we have small children, and I can't really be in the choir because I'm in the pew with the 5-year-old. And when I sing in the pew, it's too loud, mommy, it hurts my ears. And so trying to find that space for my joy was a little tricky. And so then, like I said, at church, I'm a clergy spouse and a teacher, and it's hard to figure out how to connect sometimes with those people. And then at school, I'm a teacher and I have my teacher friends, but the clergy spouse part of it, they're like, I don't understand any of that. So somehow God found a way to combine the two. And that when we moved to this church, a few rectors before us had created this whole wing of the church for the youth under the guise of, if you build it, they will come. And they never came. So we have this whole wing of the church that was being very underutilized. Lots of big space. And my husband, Brian, had been trying to figure out something that he could do. That was like he's like, before we leave here, we're going to find something to fill this space. And then at school, one of my friends, her name's Lindsay McDaniel, is a kindergarten teacher. She was noticing we had been getting an influx at our school of students with special needs. And she makes great connections with families and was discovering that those families were struggling to find childcare and summer activities for their children to do. Because in our small community, there just wasn't a lot. None of the summer camp programs had the space to take children with special needs because they didn't have the people for it. So she said, well, I'm just going to start my own summer camp then. And she did, out of her house. And she had about probably a dozen kids that first year. And she went all out, and they were going on field trips, and they were doing all the projects, and they were doing all the things. And after that, she started her own nonprofit called Hope Wins, and they provide resources to families in the area. But the heart of the thing is this summer camp. And after year 2, her husband finally told her, you can't do this out of our house anymore. Too much stuff is getting broken. There's a lot of liability. Like it's too much. So she was talking to me about that, and Brian's talking to me about, we have all this space. And I was like, what if we come look at this? So thus that connection was born, and she and her husband, Sean, came to look at our church and fell in love with the space. And so Brian brought the idea to the vestry, and the vestry said, what, you mean children are going to be using our space? And it's just been kind of a joy to see it happen. So then this summer, she was actually able to take 40 children on, probably about 8 to 10 with special needs, and then the rest are, a lot of them are from lower income families and just other families that wanted to be a part of it. And they took over just not only the youth wing, but also the parish hall, because being in a space allowed them to provide free breakfast and lunch from the Illinois Food Bank, since she was no longer in her home. So then our ECW purchased them another fridge, because we learned really quickly that 40 breakfasts and lunches takes up a whole lot of fridge space when you only have one at the church that's not used to being used. And it just provided all of this area for our church to really grow in their ministries. In youth ministry, you could say, even though the youth wasn't from our church, it was from our area. And so we, on Pentecost, gave them all the gifts of all these things that they would need for the summer camp. And we purchased them the fridge and all of these things. And it was always these people, well, what else does she need? Well, what else can I do? Well, how else can I help? And it just grew into one of the biggest ministries that we've had at the church. And it's just been a joy to see those two parts of my life combine into this big thing. That's great for the community and great for the church, and just an amazing experience for these kids.
And Ellen, do you work at the camp?
I helped out about once a week. I want to help out more next week, but being in grad school right now, I would send my kids there a couple times a week and then do all of my homework and then come at the end. But I did get to go about once a week. I would volunteer, and it was because a lot of these kids are kids that I teach during the school year. So getting to see their joyfulness and their playfulness during the summer. And again, a lot of my friends from my school here that have special needs, getting to see them being loved on and accepted by all of the kids that are there, and just how excited everybody was to be with each other, was just so fun to be able to see and be a part of.
Yeah. So you were in the right place to hear both of these needs or both of these problems.
Yes.
And it was like in your head where those two problems sort of met and solved each other.
Yes. And it's kind of combined both the areas into my life into
Because of where you were, because of who you are.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't think you could have planned to find one of those. Like, okay,
No.
Brian, I'm going to go out and find you someone for that space. Or like, okay, friend, I'm going to find you a space for your camp. You were
it
paying
just
attention
happened.
and you were listening. Yeah.
Yeah. It just kind of happened.
And you were open.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, not least because you had gotten past that place, that stuck place of like, how do I access my joy? Right. Okay, I can't be in the choir now. How do I sing? Or right? That you've already got the joy one sort of addressed for the moment.
Yes.
That's the other thing we talk about, is that because we get to practice these skills a lot, because another fundamental part of clergy spouse life, as Eli illustrates, is mobility. One day your partner has a parish in Virginia, and the next day you're zooming in from the American Cathedral in Paris or something, or somewhere near Wisconsin, depending on, luck of the draw, right? But it means that like this particular connection was specific to finding yourself in this new place, right? If you were in the last place that you were, something might have happened, but this wouldn't have happened.
No. And this was just what I feel this church needed. And it was just what I needed, to just kind of be able to combine these two areas of my life that I love, into one great ministry. That's just been good for everybody.
It's good for you. And it sounds like it's not only giving gifts to the kids and to the camp, but to some of the parishioners and the ECW. Like, people have had an opportunity. Again, as Charles said, people want chances to be generous, but they have to see the appropriate channel
Yes, absolutely. And they love seeing, even if the kids aren't in church on Sunday, they love being able to see that the signs that the kids are there. So there was, they like painted the sidewalk outside and they could see all of things. And there was be pictures up in the parish hall, and they're just this sign of life. Yeah, so there's, yeah, some of that, which the paint lasted a little longer than we had intended for it to last, but I think that's great. Um, and it's yeah, and it's just being able to talk to a lot of the parishioners on Sunday too, just like, oh, we love that this is happening. Like, what else does she need? How else can we help? It was just, it was never, gosh, why are all these kids here? Or why is this hanging there? We had for a long time during the summer, some of our special needs kids had a therapy swing that one of our parishioners generously bought. And so Brian hung it in the parish hall. So we had to like remove a tile and bolt up into there. And just the fact that nobody seemed to bat, and they're like, yeah, that's a great thing. Finn needs a swing. And it's just been really fun to see.
Well, I think that also speaks to Brian's knowledge of his people and his community
Mhm.
and his setting, that he was able to hear you and say, oh yeah, we can handle that.
We can handle that. Yes.
That'll, we would like that. That would go
Yes.
well.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all so much. And I want to leave a little bit of time for questions and comments. I'm looking in the chat. It is a God incident. I think that's, yeah. Somebody's description of your bringing those disparate things together, being in the right place at the right time. God incidents, that's right. So I wonder, am I sharing now that I've got the chat in front of the thing? That's not what I want. I'm wondering, I think we can take questions on any of these parts. I'm curious how people who are or are not clergy spouses. I know there's a few clergy spouses here in the audience. Hi guys. But I think that these skills, though they're really honed by this sort of mobile public life, are things that everybody at some point has to negotiate. And I wonder just if people have examples or push back, like, no, it works differently for me, or what is this making you think about? Now I can't see the chat. Here it is. Can't see. They warned me about this. I can't see who is here except for the panelists. Well, I'm gonna leave a minute, but it may be that most of the curiosity and questions will come after. I know this is going to be recorded and the recording will be posted. So we will make sure that there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us to continue this discussion. EPN can share those along with this recording. So whether you're watching this in person today or digitally in your today, thanks for being with us and for your interest in this topic. Want to especially thank Ellen, who I think had to get a 6-period sub to come and speak to us today. And Eli, who's maybe staying up a little late in France to join us in the afternoon. And Charles, I don't know what you've done with your house full of children, but I assume they're in the other room with the Halloween candy long enough for you to be with us. But I know everybody's got a full life going on. And I'm so grateful that you could be with us to share your experiences today. Thanks so much, everybody. I don't.